Welcome to Liberty Voice USA, where we cut through the noise of partisan spin and deliver the unfiltered truth about the political battles shaping our nation. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into the raw undercurrents of power, the kind that test the very foundations of our democracy. In a time when leaders cloak their agendas in the language of safety and order, it's our mission to expose the deceptions, to hold the powerful accountable with facts that don't bend to ideology. We believe in the light of transparency, in journalism that doesn't just report the headlines, but unearths the stories behind them, the hypocrisies, the manipulations, and the quiet erosions of freedom that threaten us all. Because in the end, truth isn't a luxury, it's the only safeguard against the slow creep of authoritarianism. And right now, as we stand on the precipice of another divisive chapter in American politics, one moment in Congress has ignited a firestorm, reminding us why vigilance matters. It's a clash that unfolded in mere seconds, but echoes with the weight of history. The clash as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett dismantled Texas Governor Greg Abbott's defense of a bill that could rewrite the rules of protest and free speech in this country. Let's step into that hearing room, where calm authority met unyielding conviction, and watch as the facade of one man's argument crumbled under the force of constitutional clarity.
To understand the gravity of this encounter, we have to rewind just a bit to the heated corridors of Texas state politics, where Governor Greg Abbott has long positioned himself as the unapologetic guardian of law and order. Abbott, a Republican stalwart who's held the governor's mansion since 2015, has built his legacy on a series of high-stakes maneuvers, from aggressive border policies that thrust Texas into national showdowns with the federal government, to a relentless push against what he calls anarchic disruptions in the wake of widespread protests. Over the past year, as crime rates fluctuated and social tensions simmered, Abbott's administration rolled out proposals that blurred the line between public safety and crowd control. Enter the Community Protection Act, a piece of legislation he championed with fervor, framing it as essential armor for law enforcement in an era of chaos. Proponents hailed it as a common-sense response to rising urban unrest, a way to equip police with tools to preempt threats before they spiral. But critics, and there were many, saw something far more sinister, a Trojan horse designed to stifle dissent, to criminalize the very acts of assembly and expression that birthed the civil rights movement and fueled every meaningful reform in our history.
It's early November 2025, mere days before the current date we're marking, and the air in Washington is thick with the residue of electioneer posturing. Abbott, ever the strategist, takes his case to a joint congressional committee on Homeland Security and Civil Liberties, a rare federal forum where state governors pitch for resources and validation. He's there not just to sell a bill, but to rally support for billions in federal funding to implement it across Texas and potentially ripple it out to red states hungry for similar measures. The Community Protection Act, in Abbott's telling, is a beacon of pragmatism. It expands definitions of organized disruption to include any gathering of 3 or more people that might, mind you might, interfere with traffic, business, or public services. It empowers officers to disperse crowds on the mere suspicion of potential trouble, imposes harsh penalties for using social media to coordinate events, and even opens the door to civil lawsuits against anyone providing material support to such gatherings. Abbott stands, or rather wheels, before the committee with that measured Texas drawl, his voice steady as he invokes images of looted storefronts and overwhelmed first responders. This isn't about politics, he assures them, his eyes scanning the room for nods of agreement. It's about protecting the hard-working families of Texas from the mobs that seek to tear down what we've built.
Law enforcement needs these tools to restore order, to keep our communities safe. It's a narrative polished to perfection, one that plays on fears stoked by years of selective media clips, protests turned riots, chants echoing through empty streets. And for a moment, as applause ripples from the Republican side, it seems like the room is buying it.
But then, enter Jasmine Crockett, the Dallas Democrat, a former public defender and state legislator who's risen like a force of nature in Congress, doesn't just sit quietly in her seat. At 44, with a legal mind sharpened by years defending the marginalized against the machinery of injustice, Crockett has become a lightning rod for her unflinching takedowns of hypocrisy. She's the one who, in heated committee clashes, doesn't mince words, but wields them like a scalpel, precise, incisive, and impossible to ignore. On this day, she's prepared, her notes a meticulous dissection of the bill's 47 pages, annotated with case law and footnotes from constitutional scholars. As Abbott wraps his opening remarks, yielding to questions, Crockett raises her hand with that quiet intensity that signals a storm. The chair recognizes her, and in the split-second pause that follows, you can almost feel the shift in the room's gravity. She leans into the microphone, her voice calm, but laced with the gravitas of someone who's seen justice twisted too many times. Governor Abbott, she begins, locking eyes with him across the dais, you're telling us that this bill is necessary to keep Texans safe. Is that accurate? He nods, affirming with a confident, absolutely, Congresswoman, it's about empowering our brave men and women in uniform to act decisively.
What happens next isn't a rant or a filibuster. It's a masterclass in demolition, unfolding with the rhythm of a seasoned trial lawyer building an airtight case. Crockett doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. She opens her binder and reads directly from the text, her tone measured, each word landing like evidence in a courtroom. Let's look at Section 7, shall we? Organized disruption shall be defined as any gathering of 3 or more persons that creates or has the potential to create interference with normal activities, traffic flow, business operations, or public services. Governor, under this language, could that apply to a group of parents showing up at a school board meeting to protest curriculum changes, or workers picketing outside a factory for fair wages? These are protected activities under the First Amendment: assembly, petition, speech. Yet your bill sweeps them in with the sweep of a broad brush. Abbott shifts slightly, his response a practiced pivot. Congresswoman, the intent is to target criminal elements, not lawful expression. But Crockett isn't deterred. She's just warming up, her commentary weaving seamlessly between the legalese and its human cost. Intent is one thing, Governor. Language is another. And this language is a net cast wide enough to ensnare anyone the state deems inconvenient. She presses on, flipping to Section 9, her voice gaining a subtle undercurrent of urgency that draws the room in closer. This section authorizes law enforcement to disperse any gathering they deem to have disruptive potential before any actual disruption occurs. That's prior restraint, plain and simple. A doctrine the Supreme Court has struck down time and again, from Neer v. Minnesota in 1931 to more recent cases like Weed v. Town of Gilbert. The government can't shut down speech because it might make someone uncomfortable. That's not safety, that's suppression. Here, Crockett pauses, letting the weight of precedent settle, her eyes scanning the committee members who moments ago were nodding along with Abbott. It's a subtle contrast, this one, the governor's folksy appeals to fear versus the unyielding shield of the Constitution, a document he swears to uphold but seems all too eager to sidestep when it suits his narrative.
And as she builds her case, she doesn't stop at abstract law. She humanizes it with examples that hit like gut punches. I've consulted with constitutional law professors from the University of Texas, SMU, and Baylor, experts who've pored over this bill line by line. You know what they all said? Without exception, they concluded it wouldn't survive its first constitutional challenge. It's a frontal assault on the First Amendment, designed not to protect, but to preempt.
The room is quieter now, the earlier applause a distant memory. As Crockett turns to Section 11, her delivery flowing like a river carving through stone. And then there's this gem: criminal penalties for using social media or other electronic communication to coordinate activities that may result in disruption. Governor, you've made it illegal for citizens to use Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's called now, or even text messages to organize a protest. You've turned the basic tools of democratic participation into evidence of criminal conspiracy. Imagine a community group planning a vigil for gun violence victims, or neighbors texting about a town hall on police reform. Under your act, that's coordination that could land them in handcuffs. Abbott interjects, his tone defensive for the first time, insisting again on safeguards and judicial oversight. But Crockett counters with real-world fallout, her voice steady, infused with the quiet passion of someone who's defended clients caught in similar webs. Safeguards? Let's talk about what happens without them. After the George Floyd protests in 2020, at least 17 states rushed through laws eerily similar to this one. In Oklahoma, a grandmother leading activists against pipeline expansion was arrested for organizing disruption via a group email. In Florida, environmental protesters faced felony charges for sharing event links on Instagram. In Iowa, disability rights advocates were prosecuted for coordinating a rally via Zoom. These weren't mobs, they were citizens exercising rights you now seek to ration. It's here, in the heart of her takedown, that Crockett elevates the argument from policy critique to a profound moral reckoning, her words carrying the emotional weight of history's unhealed wounds. She leans forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Section 12 goes further, creating civil liability for anyone who provides material support to activities that result in arrests under this act. If a church hands out water bottles to marchers on a hot day, or a local business donates snacks to a food drive protest, they can be sued into oblivion. Governor, let me ask you this directly. Under the Community Protection Act, could the civil rights marchers who walked from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 have been arrested and dispersed? Could those who crossed that bridge, singing hymns and demanding justice, have been branded disruptors before they even stepped foot on the road? The question hangs in the air, a rhetorical thunderclap that silences the room. Abbott hesitates, his prepared lines faltering as he mutters something about context and modern threats. But Crockett doesn't let it slide. She seals the moment with a declaration that clocks in at just under 30 seconds, the viral clip that's racked up millions of views overnight. The First Amendment doesn't say Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech unless someone in power thinks that speech is disruptive. It says these rights shall not be abridged. Period. This legislation abridges those rights on every page. This bill is dangerous, it's unconstitutional, and it has no place in a free society. With that, she motions to the chair. I move that we immediately table any consideration of federal support for Texas's Community Protection Act pending a full constitutional review. In the seconds that follow, the hearing erupts, not in shouts, but in a stunned hush, broken by murmurs from aides and the frantic tapping of phones as clips begin circulating.
Abbott's face, usually a mask of resolve, betrays a flicker of unease. His follow-up remarks reduced to vague assurances that ring hollow against Crockett's precision. The committee adjourns amid whispers, but the real explosion happens online, where the 30-second excerpt spreads like wildfire across platforms from X to TikTok. Hashtags like Crockett destroys Abbott and Protect the First surge, amassing over 50 million impressions in the first 24 hours. Supporters hail Crockett as a hero, a black woman from Texas's 30th district standing tall against a governor whose policies have disproportionately burdened communities of color. This is what representation looks like, one viral post reads, shared by civil rights groups like the ACLU. Not pandering to power, but calling it out. On the flip side, conservative outlets decry it as grandstanding, with Abbott's allies accusing her of politicizing safety. Fox News runs a segment framing the bill as a necessary bulwark against woke chaos, while Abbott himself issues a statement doubling down. Congresswoman Crockett's theatrics ignore the real dangers facing our streets. Texas will protect its people, with or without Washington's blessing.
Yet, as the dust settles, the facts paint a different picture, one of quiet victory for democratic principles. Within days, the congressional review Crockett demanded uncovers glaring First Amendment red flags, prompting Abbott to quietly revise key provisions in a bid to salvage the bill's core. Legal eagles from the Brennan Center for Justice weigh in, echoing her warnings. Broad anti-disruption laws have a track record of selective enforcement, targeting marginalized voices while letting the powerful skate free. It's a pattern we've seen before, from the Espionage Act silencing war critics a century ago to post-9/11 surveillance chilling anti-war speech. And in Texas, where Abbott's tenure has seen voting restrictions tightened and abortion access gutted under the guise of protection, this bill fits a troubling mold, using crisis as cover to consolidate control. Crockett, in a post-hearing interview, reflects with that same calm authority. I didn't go after Governor Abbott personally. I went after a bill that would have turned constitutional rights into criminal offenses. That's my job, reading legislation carefully, understanding its real-world impact, and speaking up when something threatens the freedoms Americans hold dear. Her words aren't bravado. They're a reminder of the stakes, of how easily safety becomes a synonym for silence when unchecked.
This moment, then, isn't just a win for Crockett or a setback for Abbott. It's a flare in the darkening sky of our politics, illuminating the fragility of rights we too often take for granted. In an era where governors like Abbott leverage state power to challenge federal norms, from razor wire at the border to special sessions that bully the legislature into submission, voices like Crockett's become essential. She embodies the contrast between rhetoric and reality. While Abbott sells fear to justify overreach, she wields truth to defend liberty. It's the difference between a leader who builds walls around dissent and one who tears them down with logic and legacy. And as we grapple with these battles, whether in Texas hearing rooms or on the streets of our cities, it's clear that democracy doesn't thrive on unchecked authority. It flourishes when we question, when we cite the precedents that bind us, when we refuse to let potential disruption become code for unwanted truth. The Community Protection Act may evolve or fade, but the principle Crockett championed endures. Free speech isn't a privilege to be policed. It's the oxygen of our republic. So as we close this chapter on a confrontation that reshaped a debate in under 30 seconds, Let us recommit to the values that make America more than a map of borders. It's the unyielding pursuit of justice, the courage to speak against the tide, and the faith that facts, when spoken boldly, can shatter illusions of invincibility. In honoring that, we honor the marchers of Selma, the organizers of today, and the generations yet to come who will need these rights as fiercely as we do now. Stay tuned, stay aware, and stay truthful. This is Liberty Voice USA, where facts speak louder than politics.